So we're coming off of a holiday weekend. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We actually haven't had an episode since USC and UCLA announced a move from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. But we're here now, and the latest development, it appears, is that our colleague Dennis Dodd has reported that the Big 12, recognizing the instability of the Pac-12, smelling blood in the water, is trying to lure at least 4, possibly 6 Pac-12 schools to join the Big 12. Simply put, the Big 10 and the SEC are about to be a power 2. The ACC seems vulnerable on some level, and the Pac-12 appears to be maybe, just maybe, on life support. Make sense of it, Deadleg. It's been a wild few days in conference realignment news.
We got a lot to get to. Great to be back. Did take a little vacation last week, and I took like a 10-day respite, true social media blackout, with the exception of the 9 minutes I hopped on when this all happened. Because just real quick, rewind all the way to last Thursday. Take my oldest son to his first movie experience ever. We saw the Lightyear movie. Within 5 minutes of that movie starting, I get a text from someone, a source, saying, "Hey, USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. Seems like something's brewing there, but it might be fishy." I was like, all right, I'm on vacation, but I'll make a couple calls after this movie ends. 20 minutes later, the same source texted me, John Wilner's tweet. Wilner, wonderful reporter out west, was the one who I guess broke this story. Apparently there was no indication of it prior to that. But man, oh man. Yeah. So here we are finally getting to talk about this and everything that Dodd has reported subsequent to all of that. Tons of noise, instability. Let's take this piece by piece. I know that people have wanted to hear our reactions to all of this as well. USC and UCLA. Let's just touch on that real quick, GP, before we get to what Dodd's reporting, because there's a lot of meat on that bone that I want to get to as well. I got no indication that this was coming, but in talking to, I don't know, half dozen people that I talked to on Thursday and Friday after and amid all this was happening, it didn't seem to land with the same kind of, brace yourself shock that Texas and Oklahoma did. But at the same time, I did have one person tell me, think about when we went back to realignment a decade ago, and the idea that you would ever have USC and UCLA leaving to join the Big Ten was truly unthinkable. Even though our geographic norms and our expectations of what a conference could or should be really got broken away literally when Rutgers and Maryland joined the Big Ten, and we saw everything that happened with all that. The idea that you would have a conference based on programs based on the West Coast joining a conference in the middle of the country really seemed completely illogical, and it's really one of the biggest reasons why Gonzaga has never joined the Big East to this point, has been the geographic part of this. And yet here we are. I just kind of want your thoughts on it. We both understand, and we can explain to the audience, although our audience is intelligent, they get why this is happening. It's purely happening because of money. It's purely happening because television networks are largely dictating this because of media packages that will pay out conferences and then filter down the schools literally in the tens and tens and tens and tens of millions on an annual basis. That's why this is happening. I happen to think it sucks, but I get why it's happening. I just wanted, a chance to for you to address here, Luce, a little bit. I'm sure you have on your radio show, but for our pod audience, how this just all lands for you. This idea that we are potentially forming a top 2, a power 2, and then everyone else in the college sports landscape. To me, even though it's reality and it's imminent, GP, doesn't mean it's a good thing. And I don't even know if it's something that a lot of fans even necessarily like.
I don't think you could intelligently argue it's good for college sports or good for consumers of college sports. But what it's good for is the athletic department budgets of the schools that are either going to be in the Big Ten or the SEC. And so I think at this point, with Notre Dame being a possible exception, if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're trying to get to the Big Ten or the SEC. It not only appears that we're headed toward a power 2, I think it's undeniable at this point that we're headed toward a power 2. Right now, the SEC is slotted to have 16 once it adds Oklahoma and Texas. The Big Ten also 16 once it adds USC and UCLA. And the reason they go out and grab the Big Ten, UCLA, and USC, despite it making no geographical sense whatsoever, is because USC is a massive football brand in the second largest media market in the country, and UCLA is a big brand in the second largest media market in the country. So you get them, you add value. And not only that, you kill the Pac-12. Like the media rights that are coming up, like for bidding, I know you know this, but it's the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And by taking the Pac-12's two most important schools, there's a scenario where if you are a media entity, CBS, ESPN, Fox, NBC, Amazon, Apple, it doesn't matter. 2 weeks ago, you were looking at this like, okay, sure, we'd rather have the Big Ten than the Pac-12, but like, the Pac-12 would be good too. If you can't get the Big Ten, you take the Pac-12. Now the Big Ten says, well, we're going to take the two most important Pac-12 schools. So now we're better than you thought we were going to be, and they're not important anymore. They might not exist in 6 months. So it really now, if all of these entities were getting ready to bid on two Power 5 leagues, in reality, now it's just there's one that matters and there's one that doesn't. So it should benefit the Big Ten in some obvious ways. So now we're going to have a supersized and awesome Big Ten, a supersized and awesome SEC. And there's a scenario where, and this is Dodd's latest reporting, where the Pac-12 doesn't even exist. According to Dodd, the Big 12 is in deep discussions with Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, and would obviously be interested in Washington and Oregon as well. But there's some thought that Washington and Oregon might be Big Ten targets. And if you are a Big Ten target or even a potential Big Ten target, there's no way you're joining the Big 12, until you know for sure the Big Ten is not an option. So right now, and the Big 12 understands that. So right now, according to Dodd, they're focused on Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. And if you can get them, it really puts the Pac-12 in a situation where they're going to have a hard time surviving. At that point, I think it really does come down to, does the Big Ten, put the final bullet in your head by taking Washington, Oregon, and or Stanford? Or can you hold it together without, in theory, USC, UCLA, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, and go out and get a San Diego State, a Boise State, and whatever you have to do to keep some sort of league together? But the Pac-12 is very much on the ropes right now, and it's why, honestly, if I were the Pac-12 commissioner, you know what I'd be doing right now? I'd get on the phone with the Big 12 commissioner, and I'd say, hey, appreciate the backstabbing, but all that aside, it's pretty clear none of our remaining schools are loyal to us. Let me back up for a second first, because I think some people might be wondering, why is the Big 12 in a position of aggression as opposed to the Pac-12? Why didn't the Pac-12 just go try to get the Big 12 schools as opposed to the Big 12 trying to get the Pac-12 schools? What's interesting about this is that what makes the Pac-12 more vulnerable than the Big 12 right now is that the Pac-12 actually has schools that the Big 10 and or SEC might want. The Big 12 doesn't. They don't have, the Big 12 has no schools that the Big 10 wants or the SEC wants. So what the Big 12 can tell, say Arizona State, Colorado, Utah right now is more or less like, look, our league is stable because the Big 12 and SEC, they don't want any more of our schools. But they might want Washington. They might want Oregon. They might want Stanford. So if you stay there and we move on and then say the Big Ten takes Washington, Oregon, and or Stanford, you're going to be in a greatly diminished league and possibly in no league at all. And so with that pitch, there's some thought that Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah might really jump to the Big 12. Then, of course, you've got Washington, Oregon, Stanford. They could all theoretically land in the Big Ten. And just like that, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, they don't have a home. Welcome to the Mountain West. So if I'm the Pac-12 commissioner, what I'm doing right now, and then I'll stop and because I want to get your thoughts on this. If I'm the Pac-12 commissioner right now, I'm on the phone with the Big 12 commissioner, and I'm saying, hey, listen, none of our current members or remaining members are loyal to us. They're all trying to leave. They would all leave if they could. So why do we have to be loyal to them? Why don't we put our heads together, pick our most valuable 16 schools, and start a new league, and leave our least valuable schools for somebody else? If you do that, then the Big 12 dies as we know it. The Pac-12 dies as we know it. You start a new league, call it the Big 16 or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter to me. And it could be something like Arizona, Arizona State, Cal, Colorado, Oregon, Stanford, Utah, Washington, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF. Like, rather than we try to kill each other or you kill us, wouldn't we both be better off if we put our heads together, take our most valuable 16, leave the others to the side, and build a brand new league that is called neither the Pac-12 or the Big 12? If I'm the Pac-12 commissioner, that's what I'm trying to do right now, because otherwise you're really at risk of not having a league in a year.
Yeah, well, there's just so much happening at the moment here with all this. Yes, that would be a prudent thing for George Kliavkoff to be doing, the Pac-12 commissioner right now. Also, as Dodd reported late on Tuesday night, ACC Pac-12 discussed, quote, loose partnership, end quote, that could include, quote, championship game, end quote, in Las Vegas. When's the last time you were in a loose partnership and it wound up good? Loose partnership. Don't know about that one. Doesn't seem like something that could end well. Loose partnership. I'm going to read Dodd's first three graphs here off the CBS Sports. Again, this is his second report from Tuesday. Shouts to the Dodd father on this. The ACC and Pac-12 have discussed what has been termed a, quote, loose partnership, end quote, that could end the season with conferences playing a, quote, championship game, end quote, in Las Vegas. Sources confirmed to CBS Sports the concept believed to have been proposed by the ACC, not the Pac-12, the ACC, is seen as a way for conferences' common rights holder, ESPN, to increase value of their current media rights contracts. Interjection for me. Again, it's all about the TV networks and them driving the money in this whole deal. Continue with Dodd's story. It's not likely this proposal would have much impact considering ESPN has cost certainty with the ACC in a contract. This is actually a very important part. Not that contracts can't be broken. The ACC deal goes through 2036. Will the Big Ten even exist in 2036? That's half joking, half serious. Story continues. The Pac-12 is trying to survive after the loss of USC and UCLA to the Big Ten in 2024. Rights for Pac-12 teams without the California powers are now worth about $30 million annually, down from approximately $42 million per program with the Trojans and the Bruins in the fold. Also, context with all this. Ben Bolch of the LA Times reported, and this is of no surprise, but, we have it, for the record here through his reporting, UCLA made this decision because it was going to have to cut a ton of sports, Olympic sports, given the current economic climate with that university and the Pac-12's deal. And now, because it's going to go to the Big Ten, UCLA is not going to have to, calve off 4, 6, 8 Olympic sports. It'll actually be able to maintain having a full athletic department because it's going to be making upward of $60, $70 million annually per the latest estimates. The Big Ten has obviously not announced its new television deal. I've been told that it will be pushed back even further now with all of this. So you say Big 12, Pac-12, do what you can do, get the 16-team league together, come together, have the other ones go to the Mountain West or whatever. That's certainly something. There's also an idea is the Pac-12 trying to somehow salvage this site. Not that it would make it better, but make it more stable. Maybe, you get San Diego State. You need another California team. San Diego State's obviously the only candidate that could possibly be under consideration. Boise State's the best program, brings the most value to the Mountain West.
UNLV.
UNLV is the other one. Would they go? They've resisted Gonzaga forever. Would you bring Gonzaga in for basketball to try and help that? I don't know, and nobody knows. The Pac-12 is trying to figure this out. They announced on Tuesday that they convened and now can immediately start seeking formally, like they're on. The powers that be are on phone calls. They were on yesterday. They are today. The rest of the week with TV network executives to try and get an idea of. All right, we have these 10 teams in our league. For now, we have these 10 teams in our league. If we got these 2 teams and became a 12-team league, what would you think? If we got these 4 teams and became a 14 or a 16-team league, if we merged, what would all of those what-if scenarios are happening in private conversations right now between Kliavkoff and everyone, high up in the Pac-12, select university presidents that are still there in the Pac-12, which is, going to be downgraded significantly not having USC and UCLA with all this. I do want to just say this. Okay. I accept this reality, Parrish. I accept it. I do accept it. I don't like it, but I accept it. But we can also address the real fact that college sports, basketball and football, the revenue producing sports here, so much of what built up college sports to be an amazing thing, literally for decades, was the fact that it was a quilt with a lot of different fabrics across the country. Okay. And the things that brought people together with this were regional, and it was regional patchwork that made for a nice national landscape. And that's really what, why conferences were born out in close proximity 80 years ago. I get it. It's not even 15 years ago. I get all that. But I do believe on some level, college sports 5-10 years from now, whatever the hell it looks like. And if I'm not going to, you got a lot of people out there proclaiming we're going to look up and it's going to be a 50-team mini NFL. Maybe it will, but no one actually knows that that's going to be what actually happens here. There's been a lot of, conjecture over the past 10 years about what college sports would be, and we're still not there yet. So we'll see on that. But I do think a lot of the things that brought people into college sports and made them appreciate it, which is so much of not just where you went to school or the school that you root for, but familiar friends, familiar foes, the villains you grow to love, and having proximity to them, playing them annually or twice in a season if it's basketball. Those things are being torn away and getting swapped out for schools. Great that USC in football is going to maybe go and play Minnesota at Minnesota once every 6 years. What the hell does that even mean? So you are going to be taking away, all in the name of conferences getting more money. What do fans get out of this? In football specifically, be careful what you wish for. I've mentioned this at least a half dozen times on the podcast. Go and look. Maybe I'll finally once and for all, put this to paper and lay it out for everyone. Go look at every single power conference school, basically since Boston College bolted on the Big East for the ACC. Go look at what they did in the two primary revenue producing sports, in football and in men's basketball. Go look at every single school that went for the greener pasture, really just for the green, for the chasing of the money. How much better is that athletic department? Are those programs, have they been since that happened? Almost none of them. Now, we've gotten to a point here where there are so many that the odds will just give way to another 2 or 3, maybe being in a better situation. But really, it's almost nobody. And I mean almost nobody. Texas A&M in a better spot. Missouri, Colorado, Maryland, BC, Rutgers, Miami, Pitt, West Virginia. I can keep going down the list. All of these schools, great. You got more money to build larger facilities. But what are you doing for your fan base? You know what fans want? They want their programs to be relevant and competing for conference championships and going deep into the postseason, be it in basketball, men's or women's football, obviously. And I know that, sports such as baseball, they are growing more in part thanks to social media. And that's a great thing. But are you even getting there? You're getting these 16-team conferences, as multiple people, conference commissioners have told me in recent days. These are once you're at 16, it barely resembles a conference. Barely. Once you get to 20, you're not even in a conference. Call it something else altogether. The more teams, the harder it is to filter through the top. And ultimately, I think the less rewarding it is for your fan base. So, yeah, we can talk about, and I still want to talk about more of what Dodd's got going here. But this chase for TV money, I understand it. But I do think you are alienating a certain populace here of your fan base, and you are tearing away and removing something that you will never get back, that brought people, or at least kept them there in the first place. And now you are bringing a certain homogeny to college sports that's separated from professionals. Like me personally, I'm wired maybe a little bit different than a lot of people. I love college basketball. I'm just okay with the NBA. I love the NFL. I'm just okay with college football. But a lot of people, they specifically love college sports, football, men's and women's basketball, and don't go to the professionals for a lot of reasons. A lot of reasons why are going to be taken away with this new, format and structure, this idea that there's going to be a power to. The more and more we get through this, GP, the more I just think, and maybe we will get there eventually, I don't know, but football needs to be operating in a different universe. It already won the court case in '84 to separate from the NCAA and doing what it's doing with its own bowl system and championships. It is even like the difference between how football operates. And then you think, like, what's the closest thing? It's men's basketball, probably. Like, men's basketball is closer to every other NCAA sanctioned sport than how football does it, just in terms of pure scholarship numbers and everything. And this is an opinion backed up by a lot of people in college sports, but the powers that be cannot quite yet bring themselves to truly separate this, because in a philosophical sense, you are at that point, athletic directors, presidents, people in power, board of directors, you would formally tear away and truly sever and separate and saying, this is professional football with, an endorsement and a sponsorship with the university name attached to it. I think that's where they should go, but they can't quite do it yet. And so what's the consequence to all this is you've got all these other sports being pulled into this situation that don't make a ton of sense. All the, the fact that UCLA is going to travel to play Penn State in men's soccer is completely ridiculous, but that's where we are. And apologies for the rant, but I at least wanted to address that part. Like, there's a real part of the soul of college sports, college football, college basketball that I think is getting withered away with all this stuff. And just because it's reality doesn't mean that it doesn't suck big time.